like EG might lose Impact at the end of this year. His contract is expiring on the 22nd of November, but basically everyone else is locked up until the end of 2024, with the exception of Kaori, who obviously you didn't have an intention of playing onto this roster. And we're not going to obviously get into the Danny shit, because like that's.
I mean, he also just said he has an NDA, can't talk about it anyway, so there's nothing he could say.
But what was I want to talk about what it was like suddenly bringing Kaori in and how you got him up to speed, especially at Worlds, because he was an ADC that looked more appropriate to the meta, at least in playoffs, even though he didn't have synergy and was not even on the same continent when you guys called him up. But by the time Worlds got around, he also, I think, really he had a good performance on an individual level overall. And I think it was surprising to see that he would be able to handle the pressure of these scenarios that you kind of had to thrust him into, and then perform pretty well as a whole. Were you happy with Kaori's performance? And like, how did you get him into this roster that I know you very deliberately built around Danny, which can be hard for another player to take that spot?
So I think it was a hard fit for Kaori. Kaori is somebody who has a very strong laning phase. I mean, I think even by international standards, him and Vulcan showed, they got lots of 2v2 kills even in group stages against some of the strongest bot lanes. Some very strong bot lanes. I wouldn't say the strongest 2v2 bot lanes in the tournament in our group, but I think Kaori adapted as best as he possibly could, but he was put into a very, very difficult situation. What I would say, maybe to go a little bit towards the Danny stuff. So what Thorin says is very fair. The story around Danny is, and this is a very, very basic story that you can come and tell, which is that there was an amount of pressure that Danny was under, and at some point Danny decided that he couldn't fulfill that requirement, and then it's a very easy narrative to go and say, oh, this player didn't have enough, didn't have it in him, or this is a player this is a player that or maybe coaches didn't care enough about him, and he was put in a very, very difficult situation. But the key thing is that he couldn't cut it, right? And kind of discussing Danny in those terms is, I think, how people have discussed the narrative around Danny at the end of the year. And I think that this is basically the only kind of way, the only narrative that we have around it, right? It's very clear that he stepped down once EG would qualify for Worlds, but I think that there's another way that something like this could be framed in theory. So I'm not saying that this happened. I'm saying that there's two reasons why players may choose to stand down in a situation like Danny chose to stand down, right? Number one is they can't handle the pressure and they move on, right? Number two, the number two situation you could have is that a player is very, very near to their limit. They push themselves extremely hard.
Yep.
Push themselves maybe past what they should push themselves in order to be a part of their team. And at some point, they reach a point where they cannot push themselves any further, but it's not down to not being able to cut it. It's just that there is a push that a player like this is pushing themselves, get what they want, and then stand down because they think it's better for their teammates, right? And those two things are very different, right? Because in the one case, it's very easy to come and say to a player, okay, this is a player that couldn't cut it, right? In the second situation, there's a very interesting discussion to be had, which is, if a young 18-year-old player is pushing themselves at this kind of a limit and pushing themselves to this kind of a level, and why is this player being allowed to push themselves to this level for such a long, sustained period of time? And what I would say on this is, what I would say about Danny is a player. It's very sad to see the narrative around Danny, because what I would say about Danny is when Danny came up, and one of the reasons he went straight from amateur to LCS is that he was a player Like Danny literally doesn't care about glory. You know, he doesn't care about being the most recognized person. You know, there's VODs of the games when he was playing at the LCS finals, where, you know, the crowd is cheering Danny because it's the 100 Thieves series after he just got the penta the previous day.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the first thing he's saying to his teammates? He's saying, why are they cheering for me? Like, I didn't do anything. And this is the thing that I would say about Danny, is that Danny was always a player that put other people before himself. And the reason he was in the game was to test himself to see how far he could go as an individual. Okay. So which of those two narratives you choose to go along, right, with is, you know, he couldn't cut it and he was, you know, he just put his teammates in a really bad position, or, you know, he recognized that his teammates needed him to play at a really high level so that he could go to Worlds. He pushed himself to that point where he could get his teammates to Worlds. And then, you know, after he'd done that, after he fulfilled his obligations, you know, step back. Those are two very, very different narratives and things that maybe can be thought about, right? Because I think there's the discussion around this point is it lacks kind of a lot of nuance, and I think kind of it's very easy to just put a lot of things just on that. Okay, so
I mean, a point you made there that's very interesting. Yeah, go on, Monty.
Hold on just a second, Peter. You've got some squeaking in the background. I think it's one of the fans. If you wouldn't mind turning it up. Yeah, it's all very interesting. I just want to make sure that we don't have like the squeaking going. So thank you. Okay, sorry, Thorin. Continue.
Right. The point that he's sort of illustrating there in an abstract sense, we can't speak about whether it's specifically the case here, is basically, I'll put it a different way because I don't think you hit the first part hard enough. You made the second part clear. Think about the difference of this, guys. It's not as simple as someone was totally fine. Their life was normal. They were a normal pro player. And then one day they woke up and they were like, I can't ever play League of Legends ever again. And then it was just like, what the hell? You quit on us? Like, you left? Like, wow, where was this coming from? We couldn't possibly have predicted. What if the other scenario was the person gradually got into this situation of whatever trouble they were in? And in this scenario, maybe actually the moment when they could have felt like, actually, I maybe want to quit now, is like, oh, but the problem is like, we have to play the playoffs maybe, or maybe we've got the lower bracket run to do. We've got to beat all these teams. So instead you go, you know what? I'll just find a way mentally to get the next season. Wow, we've won this one. I'll find another way to get the next one. Wow. Right, we got to Worlds right now. Sorry, now I have to take a break. Like, this is too much now. Look, we've got the team to Worlds. Someone else can go in my place. Like, that would be a point Peter's making abstractly is, wouldn't that make you think of that person in a different sense? You actually wouldn't say, what a loser. I guess they can't cut it. Like, get the fuck out. This is for, like, you know, champions only. What you'd actually say is like, wow, what a fucking heroic effort. Even if in the end you were like Moses and you couldn't go to the promised land with the rest of the team, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's also, you know, a lot of people who are criticizing this have never really felt the kind of pressure that exists to be a professional player, because you have to maintain a level that is, you know, elite among the elites. It's really, really difficult to do that. And the amount of dedication and training that you have to go through is very challenging. And even if you have the talent to do it, not everybody can do, even the talented ones may not be able to do it at that level for a super extended period of time. And it's a rare quality. This is why we celebrate players like Faker, who somehow continue to be relevant 10 years deep into their career. It is an enormous sacrifice to play at this level for such a long period of time, because unlike physical sports, there aren't limitations to how much video games you can play, which means that the training process is often even more grueling in terms of your time.
There aren't physical ones. That's the joke, isn't it? Clearly there are mental limits to how much you can play. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, of course. But
by the way, I'd even say this is an angle people miss. Despite what people might tell you on Twitter, I have never criticized Danny for not playing at this point in time. I was very clear about who I was criticizing. Spoiler, one of the people's in this call, it was people who framed it a certain way. And if they themselves, I didn't do this, Peter, if they themselves contrasted Danny or Jojo, in this case, with other super super veteran players, I think I had a very apt point to make, which is typically those veteran players are proven in those scenarios, and they're just unlikely to have the same scenarios. So anyway, that's by the by. I'm not bringing that up for Peter now. But the point I would make is this. It's why, if you ever noticed, I've got a track record that goes way back on this. I never spin it as like, you should play if you feel terrible or you had some tragedy in your life, some family passing, illness or something. I go the other way. Actually, my expectation is the majority of people will not be able to play in those scenarios, and understandably will have to step aside or take time off or undergo over some sort of rehab. If you are the extremely rare person Monty's talking about, the 1 in a million guy who somehow can get through it, somehow can battle personal tragedy. So if you're double lift, where everyone knows what happened to his mom dying right before the LCS finals, but he chose to play anyway, and he won. In Counter-Strike, we had a great example where Dupree's dad died something like 3 days before a major. He not only won the major, he had some of his best career stats ever. And then the third one a lot of people do not know is Rafa, the Quake player, actually during all the lockdown era had a scenario where I think it was his girlfriend or his fiance just died like very shortly before the World Championship of Quake, and he just won the World Championship of Quake and did it as like a tribute or whatever. Those are extremely, all those people I've just listed there will be in Hall of Fame one day as some of the greatest, like, just humans to ever play esports, never mind like just players and esports. That is very rare, and you should absolutely not expect that to be the standard. That's why, as Monty says, if you are that sort of person, we'll give you even more praise. We'll sort of be like, dude, that's like something out of a movie. I can't believe you did that.
Yeah. And look, there's a lot of people who, there's a lot of conversation about mental health these days, which I think is a good conversation to have. But just to be clear to everybody, there is nothing mentally healthy about playing this many video games or sports. Like, we're not talking about people who are normal individuals. Like, you have to have a psychotic dedication to competition to reach this level, whether it's a sports or esports. And these people are just built differently. And there isn't a universe where you can say, well, these people need to have like a healthy, balanced life, or, the stress of this situation is immense, and it often drives these people to new heights. It's not for the faint of heart, and there is nothing that anyone's ever going to be able to do to make this level of competition less intense. You
cannot know. Here's the other thing: you cannot know before if someone's going to make it. It's very much sink or swim. You're thrown in the deep end, and you make it or you don't. Come on, Peter.
I would agree with that. The only further point I would add to this is, obviously, it's worth saying that, when double lift obviously is very admirable for what he chose to do, but he was a multi-year veteran at that point, right? And there's a difference between double lift at that point and Danny at this point, and that is, this is normally a skill set that you would normally pick up over time and you will learn over time, right? To pace yourself.
All the people I listed are mega veterans, by the way.
And it's very easy for people to just sit there, not say anything, while somebody like Danny would take criticism in a situation like this, instead of maybe asking a question. Is there something that could have been done to look after Danny? And where would that kind of responsibility fall?
I mean, it's obviously a tough situation. I have to ask.
Wait, don't get too triggered about the fan. Just imagine that we're on like a bike ride on a penny farthing next to Peter Dunn.
Sorry.
I don't know if it's the fans or is it?
It could be some chimes outside or something.
It's literally birds. It's literally, I can't stress.
Oh, it's birds.
Oh,
okay,
there you go, then.
Can you go kill them real quick? All right, guys. Well, there's nothing we can do about the birds.
No, there's nothing we do.
You got to deal with it. Yeah. Fucking birds.
All I'll say is this: it's quite an apt analogy, isn't it? A lot of you guys are tapping out 1 second into something mildly annoying going on in the background. Like, imagine being a pro player and having all those fucking voices inside your head all the time. Pressures, expectations. That's like 50 of those sounds. Exactly. You guys wanted to tap out.
The sound of the tweets in their ears as they have to read all the garbage.
Yeah, basically, Peter's just getting my like Twitter experience from like a year ago, whatever.
But yeah, that's another underappreciated aspect of this is at least professional athletes have kind of a degree of separation oftentimes, but the expectation in esports is that you are streaming, that you are tweeting, that you are on social media in direct access to fans, and those fans can often be quite cruel. And so it adds even another layer of stress for being involved in esports.
I think that this is also, though, something which maybe is very hard for people from other regions to kind of understand about North America, which is that sometimes the fan base in North America. I'm really sorry about these birds. I really
it's
can't.
great. I'm loving it. All right, continue.
I'm so sorry. But like, it's literally just a nest of birds. I really can't do anything to them.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. We'll just continue.
But you know, this is something maybe if we have a wider discussion about North America, which is worth saying, right? Which is that I think that the amount of criticism that comes towards players and the toxicity and the negativity around North America is unlike any region in the entire world. And some of that is deserved, right? But I mean, maybe to give an example, obviously there's all of the, like, you know, I've never, before coming to North America, I never got so many people telling me to like kill myself or things like this in Twitter DMs.
In just random fans.
Why do you have your DMs open, you psycho?
Because I want to interact. I want people to be able to interact with me. It's really weird.
Oh my god!
Still on that naive train, Monty, of like, yeah, but what about the legit people? It's like, mate, the impact of the bad ones counterbalances that.
I mean, there was a point where
Peter Dunn's committed to ruining his own mental health. I set up a fortification, you know.
I really considered it the world's because there was a guy who just clipped me out of context to like some honest reply to some message that. Anyway, it's tough. I've always tried to do it. I'm going to keep trying to do it. I may regret it at one point in the future, but for now it's okay. But maybe I can give another example, like a Danny example, right? Which is the second week that Danny joined the LCS team. I had an anonymous Twitter DM messaging me saying that Danny was boosting accounts whilst playing for EG. Okay. And this guy, he had tons of screenshots. He said, you know, this had been confirmed by multiple people. And I looked at, and, you know, who knows how many other people he done this. And, you know, he said he knew it was Danny. It was definitely Danny. You know, everyone within some kind of community knew it was Danny. And we were scrimming at the time that those boosting games happened. And I mean, like, to give you an idea of what some of these guys go through, some of these kids go through, it's completely absurd, right? In Europe, the one thing that in Europe is that, you know, I don't get on with everybody in Europe. I don't get on with everyone in the European scene. But whenever you hear a rumor about yourself in Europe, you can kind of see, okay, yeah, I kind of did do that, but, you know, he's kind of spinning it in a bad way. He's kind of mean, right? You know, this rumor is kind of mean. But I can kind of understand how, if you had a completely different point of view to me, you might see things like that, right? But in North America, people just make up stuff. Like, it's the most crazy thing. I don't understand it. They just make up stuff about pro players, about what a pro player did on this time, about, you know, and I don't know if it's clout chasing. I don't know if it's just, you know, just something that's acceptable to do in North America that maybe isn't as acceptable to do in Europe. But the amount of shit that these guys have to go through in this region is absolutely crazy. And, you know, there's whole discords dedicated in North America to just making stuff up about people. I don't know. It's very, very, very odd. So I think that the amount of wear and tear that you get over the course of a year as a pro in North America is also higher than in Europe. You know, I can't talk about Korea, obviously, right? Korea is another level. But you know, it's definitely different, and that's something that I've learned, and it's something, you know, even people are talking about these days. You know, Chaui talking about the TSM subreddit. You know, every single time that they lose a game, people are tagging him, flaming him, like hard, going really, really hard in kind of an unacceptable way. And this is something which is very common in North America. Sorry,
I mean, Chaui recently came out too and said that even like the TSM Discord was like hard flaming, like tagging him and hard flaming him, and it's just outrageous that would be the case. Like, I just don't understand why TSM just doesn't ban these people instantly, or like, why does the coach have to be inside the fucking Discord? Like,
I know what you mean, Monty.
What's going on there? You know,
but the problem is, remember, it's TSM. Like, you can't just ban the entire fan base, can you? Like, if you've never been on the TSM sub, like, I know Dom's done this a million times now. I used to rush to the TSM sub when they would lose like LCS finals or something, mate, because it is the most amazing. Like, it's like you just go through the looking glass, because the same people who before the final are like, wow, TSM's the best, they're gonna win, I love every player, they're all the best at their position. Afterwards, it's like they just like want everyone fired. Like basically everyone except Bjergsen is like, fire this guy, the coaching staff, Reginald himself. Like they just turn so hard on you. It's crazy. It's fucking crazy, mate.
No, I do. I mean, I think there are similar fan bases to that in Europe. Like Fnatic's fan base is also kind of crazy at times and can go in on their staff and have these.
I've even seen it from the
enormous
G2 ones, dude. Like the G2 ones got for a while to be the Cloud9 ones where it's like, whatever, like they're obnoxious in the sense that Carlos is obnoxious, but generally because they were just so used to winning, they were pretty chill fan base. But just look at the splits they didn't win, mate, and then look at when they looked like they were in trouble. They also turned dark.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.